this is the playbook. This is the game, right? The game is you as a leader come to the table with some capability, some skill level on each of these 4 pillars, on sales, on leadership, on coaching, on business. Your goal is to figure out what your faults are and then be internal and drive yourself to success to figure out what are the skills that I'm lacking. Another kind of cool thing about the 9 Ps that you got me excited to think about here is that they're also inverse. It's an inverse relationship. So let me, so it's an inverse relationship. So what does that mean? You kind of think of them as like a scale of justice, right? So like for example, and you guys know this. I mean, this is not rocket surgery or anything, right? It's that if you've got, if you've got like phenomenal. So let's say you're I don't know. Let's just give you a score, right? So let's say you're a 10 out of 10. You're a 10 out of 10 here. Well, if you're a 10 out of 10 here, then you can get away with being a 2 out of 10 over here. So they're kind of inverse with each other, right? They're like the scale of justice, So on the flip side, and you've seen this, right? On the flip side, if you're a 10 out of 10 here, then you can in a lot of cases be a 2 out of 10 over here. You can kind of have not the best pricing or product or placement or promotion or positioning or packaging, and you can kind of get away with it. Now, obviously, if you're a 10 and a 10 on both, then you have world domination and you take no prisoners and you're Cobra Kai, sweep the leg, no mercy, right? So that's also kind of a good way to look at it and it's also good to think about too when you're going into new markets and you have new land positions and so forth. It's like, okay, well, this situation we're in right now, this is a 5 out of 10 opportunity. So just realize it's going to require a 10 out of 10 salesperson to be able to sell through that. So just kind of keep that in mind too. So those are all kind of inverse type of things, which are good to think about. All right, so let's go to the 4 pillars of sales leadership. All right, so here's the origin story behind this. So going back to the Richmond American days, again, I'm this national sales trainer, and I learned a lot from this guy David Mandrich. So recently, he sold Richmond American Homes. They sold to this Japanese company, Sakasui House, and I don't know, he made like $100 million personally. It was crazy. So I learned a lot from that guy, just being with him and driving neighborhoods and so forth, and he was pretty tough. And what I learned is I would notice that there were these 4 kind of characteristics that he was looking for in a sales leader, and if a sales manager wasn't succeeding, then what he would do, which was not the right thing to do, but he would do is he would say, okay, this sales manager is not good at making sales happen, so let's go find a salesperson and promote them into management, and we need that kind of person, right? And so he would basically, like, if the sales manager was failing, they were always failing in one of these 4 areas. But instead of trying to fix the area and instead of trying to coach them on how to fix it or how to coach them up and give them the skill gap, then instead he just thought it was a talent thing. And he was like, hey, let's just go find a person that's better at blank. And so it was almost this, like we were constantly in this, like, I don't know, this downward spiral of Groundhog's Day of never really improving. And so what I mean by that, and I'll kind of give you the example here, is you think each of us guys have strengths in these 4 areas. Okay, so it's almost like, I'm gonna give you like an 80s reference. So when I was an 80s kid, we would play Dungeons and Dragons, right? And so Dungeons and Dragons is the way you start this game up, and you decide you have like so many points, and you have to decide, okay, where do you want to allocate your resources? Do you want to have more? Do you want to have more charm? Do you want to have more like warrior skills? Do you want to have more magic skills? Do you want to right? Do you want to have more charisma? Whatever. And so you would have so many points, and you have to like allocate your points. Well, that's kind of how we are, right? As human beings. Each of us as sales managers, we kind of start off with so many allocation of our points, meaning that some of you might be really good at sales, or might be good at really leadership or coaching or the business pillar. You might be really good at this, but that means that you have a skill gap deficiency in the other areas. And so we get hired, here's my opinion, so write this down. We get hired, right? We get hired because of our strengths, right? And we get fired because we don't focus on our weaknesses. And one of the things that I've always been a fan of is focus on your faults and never give up. That is a belief system I've lived by. I actually learned it in my fraternity in college. So that was one of the things we had to memorize, was focus on your faults, never give up, right? I do believe that. So we get hired for our strengths, right? But we get fired because of our weaknesses, because we're not improving. We're not fixing that skill gap. And so what I learned from David Mandrich, and I'll kind of break through these with you, and we'll kind of talk about them and give you guys a path, because awareness is the birthplace for change, is that we each have these 4 skills. Okay, so like this, the first skill is sales, right? And that's where you're a sales dog. Okay, you're a sales dog as a sales manager, and you came from the field, and you could sell. If you went back in the field tomorrow, you'd be one of the top 10% salespeople. Okay, so if that's you, you're here. Like you're a 10 out of 10. You're a 10 out of 10 on this skill. Okay, on this pillar, right? So again, you came from the field. Sales. If you went back in the field tomorrow, you'd be a top 10% salesperson. So you know the playbook of selling better than the players. That would be the sales skill. Okay, the second pillar is leadership, and that's where if you're a 10 out of 10 there, that's where you're really good at it's structure and setting standards, and you're really good at retention. You're really good at creating visions. Without a vision, people will perish. You're really good at communication. You're really good at getting people to rally around you, and you're really good at culture. You're really good at agenda setting and sales meetings and comp structures, and you're really good at all that kind of stuff, right? So you have that leadership pillar down. Okay, that would be a 10 out of 10 there. Or maybe you're skilled at coaching, and that's that stuff that I taught you earlier of how to go from external to internal, and how to reframe things, and how to understand what people's problems are very quickly, and how to get them to see things differently. And so maybe you're really good at the coaching pillar, and that's something that comes naturally to you. You have a strength there, and that's great. Or the last one is the business pillar. And that's where, when the Brian Adams of the world comes to you, or the general manager comes to you, and they ask, hey, why am I losing sale? Why are we losing sales to XYZ competitor? Okay, the business pillar is that you know exactly how to answer that. It's the adjustments need to be made. You know how to change your product. You know how to change your feature proposition. You know how to the KPIs that need to be moved in order to communicate that to the boss man to make those wise decisions, right? Like that's what the business pillar is. Okay, so the cost of client acquisition. The numbers. Like that's Shark Tank stuff. It's like, know your numbers. That's the business pillar, right? Okay. So I share this with you because what I learned from David Mandrich is that if a division, let's say Las Vegas, was failing, right? And let's say the last person he brought in was a business guy. He didn't really have a lot of sales acumen, but he knew the numbers. But they were having a horrible turnover problem. Why were they having a turnover problem? Well, because the guy, the manager, knew the business, but he didn't know leadership. He didn't know how to retain people. He didn't know how to create a culture where people wanted to run through walls for him. So what would happen is all of a sudden they would fire Fred. So fire Fred, and let's go. HR, go find a great leader for me that can fix retention. And then they would bring in April, right? And April would come in, and that was the awesome leadership pillar person, and maybe knew a little bit of business, right? But couldn't help their people sell anything, because they didn't really know the playbook of selling. And so the top producers, right, the inmates started running the asylum because the top producers kind of knew more about selling than the leader did. And so the top producers kind of spoke with more certainty and spoke with more clarity than the leader did. And so the leader was like, well, I feel like an imposter, right? And so then all of a sudden, that person would get fired. And then, they would say, hey, go find someone else. They would go promote someone from the field that knew sales, right? But didn't know how to coach people and didn't know. But anyway, I think you guys get the idea. And so what I learned, and this is something that I'm sharing with you that I think is just so cool to think about, is that what I learned is that this is the playbook. Like this is the outcome. This is the game, right? The game is that you as a leader come to the table with each of the with some capability, some skill level on each of these 4 pillars: on sales, on leadership, on coaching, on business. Okay, your goal is to figure out what your faults are, and then be internal and drive yourself to success to figure out what are the skills that I'm lacking. Okay, so if I'm lacking business skills, what are the numbers that my boss is constantly asking me for, and how do I figure that stuff out? If it's coaching, how do I get people to go from external to internal? If it's retention, how do I create more structure and certainty and a culture of excellence? If it's sales, how can I immediately immerse myself in stuff like warrior selling and learn the process of selling so I always know the solutions on how to help them, right? Because sometimes you can know a coaching process, but you don't know the prescription, right? So you might know how to reframe someone, and they're like, yeah, I agree. I should definitely learn how to sell through this objection. Well, and they would say, hey, April, how would you sell through the objection? You're like, well, I don't really know. Well, that's the sales side, right? So you have to kind of know the content and you have to know the structure. You have to kind of know all of it. Okay, so just as an awareness exercise right now, team, right now, as an awareness exercise, I think you should evaluate yourself like on this sheet, right? You should give yourself kind of a rating, you should fill in the blank and say, I'm a, whatever, on a scale of, 0, on 0 to 10, I give myself a blank on sales, on blank on leadership, a blank on coaching. So I think you should probably give yourself an awareness. And here's the cool thing. I hope this is helpful for you is that, again, the truth will set you free, right? So awareness is the birthplace for change. And the good news is all of this stuff is easily fixed. Like all of this stuff, if you're in our course over the next 12 months, we're going to help you in each of these areas. So we're going to give you the skills in each of these areas. So that's not a problem for you. If you would like it faster, then you just got to dive in.